The offense wins the day. We'll tell you who stood out. It's Locked On LSU. Let's get it.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Of course, at FanDuel, make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. LSU was back on the practice field Monday morning. Yours truly was there. We got about 90 minutes worth of practice viewing time and then spoke to players after practice. Will Campbell, Kyron Lacey, Greg Penn, Tank, Jacoby, and Guillory all met with the media after practice. And we'll run through everything we saw and a sad note to pass along as we wrap up today's episode, as a former LSU assistant has died. A couple of notes here as we start. Monday, Tigers were in shell, so helmet, shoulder pads. We got about 90 minutes of viewing. A couple of notable absences. Jalen Lee, Braden Swinson continue to be absent. As I understand it, they are finishing up coursework. And when the coursework is complete for the summer, then they'll be able to join the team. The anticipation or the expectation is that was supposed to be Monday. It didn't happen. So we'll see when they might be out there. A couple of players that were limited. Shelton Sampson, Xavion Thomas were limited in drills on Monday. Both were dressed. Thomas was not going through the receiver drills. He was back there with the kick returners, but not going through workouts. Three players did need to be tended to by the medical staff during practice. Freshman corner Bernard Causey, then John Emery and Major Burns. Both Emery and Burns returned to practice and participated fully after they were nicked up a little bit. A little bit of kind of the way practice was structured. So that'll let me kind of explain how we're going to make our way through this episode today. We got to see a team 2-minute drill. So I want to go through that because there's some big takeaways. There were a couple of other team periods where it was 11 on 11, primarily working on the running game and the screen game. Then we also got to see a good bit of individual drills in which wide receivers went one-on-one against corners and offensive and defensive line went one-on-one against each other. And I charted a lot of that, so I want to share with you who stood out. So we'll make our way through all of that here on today's episode. So thanks for being here with us. Let me start with that 2-minute drill, because I think this is probably the thing that's going to be most intriguing for a lot of people. So this was 11 on 11, ones on ones. The offense was essentially running a 2-minute offense. So as they advanced the ball, they kept moving down the field. It wasn't like when we talked about 7-on-7s in the previous episode where every play started, say, at the 20-yard line, right? So they were advancing the ball, trying to go score. And it was ones on ones, and the ones had eight snaps. And boy, they were moving the ball right down the field. One of the most interesting things, if you remember from our camp report day one, was that in the 2 full 7-on-7 periods we got to watch, Chris Hilton was not targeted one time. By the way, that's not to say Chris Hilton did anything wrong. I think if anything, it's more of an example of the embarrassment of riches that this team has on the offensive side of the ball. But in every rep I charted, Chris Hilton wasn't targeted one time in those team periods. On Monday, the very first snap, almost as if it was intentional, went down the right sideline to Chris Hilton, who burned freshman Juwan Johnson, who was playing the star, and caught a deep ball down the right sideline and made a beautiful catch as he fell to the ground. So great play by Chris Hilton that got that drive jump started. It is worth noting, with Major Burns nicked up a little bit, Juwan Johnson, the freshman, was with the ones at star. And star, if you're not familiar, in Blake Baker's defense, the star position is sort of a hybrid defensive back linebacker, almost like a box safety. That's where Major Burns is playing. Well, Burns wasn't there, so Juwan Johnson was in that role. And with the twos, it was Austin Osbury. So first play, deep right, completed to Chris Hilton, and boom, 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 they're moving down the field. Kyle Parker rotated in with the ones, again, second-year player, and they went back-to-back Kyle Parker, short right side, where he had a nice catch and run, beating Sage Ryan and Jordan Gilbert on consecutive plays. So the Tigers moved the ball right down the field, and in 7 plays, they are at the goal line. I mean, they're inside the 10-yard line, so they're goal to go. And Nussmeier's in the shotgun. He's got C.J. Daniels to his left, and the play was well covered. And Nuss held and then threw over the middle into traffic, and Ashton Stamps jumped the route and intercepted it at the goal line. And it's one of those things. It was a great illustration of, for Garrett Nussmeier, the really good and the thing you got to be concerned about. The really good, the accuracy, the arm strength, the tempo, the confidence, moving you right down the field. And then in that situation, instead of throwing the ball away or eating it, he tries to force the ball into traffic, and you turn the ball over at the goal line. So that was a bad play for Nuss. He was great on Thursday in day one. Now he incidentally did throw an interception on a deep ball that he threw in a double coverage, looking for Mason Taylor. That was intercepted by Ashton Stamps. Well, this was again Ashton Stamps who got Nuss again, but at the goal line. A couple of the personnel things that may be interesting to you. So as we mentioned, with Major Burns was out, and Johnson went to star. Sage Ryan and Ashton Stamps were your first team cornerbacks as well. So Sage Ryan, remember, spent all spring at safety, was playing corner when we got to see him on Thursday. Brian Kelly said they're cross-training him, back at corner again on Monday. When the twos went in, Ricky Collins took the first reps with the twos, and then A.J. Swan went in. And when Collins was in, it was all screens and handoffs to John Emery. The final play for Collins was a low snap by Cohen Eccles, so poor snap. And then Swan got 4 snaps, and his last snap was a really nice pass on the right side to Trey Green for a catch and run. So Green making his presence felt again. But he was not the highlight player of the day. The highlight of the day came from Kamorian Pimpton. And I'll get to that in just a quick second, because when we got to watch wide receivers and corners go one-on-one, and pass catchers, wide receivers, tight ends, and defensive backs go one-on-one, boy, did Kamorian Pimpton flash. And I'll get to that as we continue here on Locked On LSU, your team every day. Love telling you about our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel, a great partner of ours here on Locked On LSU. And you know I love sports. I tell you every day, I love them so much. So do you. That's why you're listening to this podcast or watching us. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. The sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers every day with a boost or a bonus. That's daily. That's right. Something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. How about Dinger Tuesdays? $5 in bonus bets for every home run. You want more info? You can get it right now at FanDuel. Of course, remember, same game parlay, 30% profit boost. I can't imagine why, even if you've ever used another app, why you wouldn't take advantage of boosts and bonus when they're available. So make sure you do it. Get over to FanDuel. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So I mentioned, as we were kind of making our way through the team period, that they also went wide receivers against corners and offensive line against defensive line. And I want to delve into that And, of course, the wide receivers against corners is where we saw Kamori and Pimpton really flash. But I got to remind you, we appreciate you for making Locked on LSU your first listen of the day. How about for your second listen? Enjoy Locked on College Football. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussions on the upcoming season, the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked on College Football, available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So remember that last year, I've referenced this several times. It was the first practice of fall camp a year ago when LSU ran this drill. It was receivers against corners. Really, it was pass catchers against DBs. And it's one-on-one. And admittedly, the pass catchers have an advantage. There's no help over the top. You can't double team. There's no safeties. There's no line. There's no pass rush. It's just quarterback standing. The receiver knows the route. They run the route against the defensive back. You would expect the receivers would have a little bit of success. The crazy part is last year in the first day, if I charted 20 reps, the receivers won 18 of the 20. And maybe one of the, and I remember one of the incompletions was a drop by Shelton Sampson on a ball where he had Deuce Chestnut dusted by like 6 yards. So it was overwhelming. In this iteration, the receivers caught 16 of the 25 passes. So not nearly as overwhelming, but 6 of the incompletions, 6 of the 9 incompletions, I would classify as bad throws. There was one pass breakup, a true pass breakup, and that was Michael Turner, the freshman, on Jelani Watkins. And Watkins had him beat. Turner made a really nice recovery, played the ball, knocked it down. No interceptions for the defense. But the 2 best plays of the day were courtesy of sophomore Kamori Pimpton. The first, he was making his way on an out route toward the right sideline, falling down, caught a tipped ball against Austin Osbury. Great body control, vision, hands, all of it, great play. But then, near the end of the session, it was Kamori Pimpton against Deshaun Spears. Of course, that's the freshman safety who I and others have raved about, really looks the part. Kamori Pimpton, a tight end, hit Deshaun Spears with a double move and absolutely froze him in his tracks. I mean, literally, Spears didn't move. It was impressive, to say the very least. And my big takeaway from that is, from our day one practice report, I raved about the day that Trey'Dez Green had, and it was justified. Trey'Dez Green was awesome. And we talked about how CJ Daniels and Kyron Lacey, had 4 and 3 receptions respectively, how Chris Hilton didn't have a grab, how a freshman like Kylan Billiot, deep touchdown reception over the top. And then on Monday, here I am raving about a guy like Kyle Parker, who caught back-to-back catches in the 2-minute team drill. Kamori Pimpton, who had the most impressive plays in the wide receiver cornerback drill. My point is that whenever somebody isn't mentioned, it doesn't mean that they're not playing well or performing well. It's just that it's somebody else's day. And that's very evident right now, that LSU, the offensive skill among the pass catchers is kind of staggering. Like, that's not even counting a guy like Mason Taylor, who ESPN about a week ago put out a list of their top players at every position for next year's draft. And Mason Taylor was listed as the top tight end for next year's draft. And we're barely mentioning because you have all of these other guys that are splashing right now early in fall camp. Listen, I'm not breaking any news here telling you LSU's offense is going to be good. I think we all expect they're going to be really good. And a big part of that is the offensive line, which I'm going to talk about here in just a quick second. But also because, man, the skill they have among their pass catchers, I just don't know how you feed that many mouths, because they're all good. And maybe the best thing is you are well protected and insulated from an injury. If you do unfortunately have an injury, which those are bound to happen, you've got plenty of depth and talent and ability there. So really good day for LSU's wide receivers. Now, we saw two different periods where the offensive line went against the defensive line. One was a 3-on-3 period where you had two defensive linemen and a linebacker against three offensive linemen. And effectively, the defensive line was trying to shed a double team. That was the impression. A couple of the reps that stood out. Emory Jones had a nice pancake block on Kimo Makanaeoli. Dom McKinley had a really good rep splitting a double team. Some of the freshman offensive linemen are having a little bit of a tough go. Ethan Callaway had a rough day. And listen, I'm not calling out Ethan Callaway. He's a freshman in his fourth ever practice of college football. But both in this drill and the pass rush drill, as you're going to see here in a second when I talk about it, it was a rough day for Ethan Callaway and the coaches. Brad Davis and even the assistants were all over him. He's got a lot of growing up to do. He's a big kid, looks good in the uniform, but you could tell sometimes, maybe the best way to say it is looking at a guy like Ethan Callaway and Ori Williams, who, had a flub up and the coaches made him run, had to run the length of the field a couple times. Maybe that's even more of an illustration of how impressive it is what Will Campbell and Emory Jones did as true freshmen starting the way they did. Then this is a drill we've seen often where the offensive line goes against the defensive line, and it's a pass rush drill, but it's a one-on-one. The entire line, like the entire offensive line, lines up, and the objective there is so that the defender can't just go super wide. It's trying to simulate space. But, for example, Will Campbell went against Savion Jones. Garrett Dellinger went against Jacoby and Guillory, and so on down the line. And they ran 17 reps. The defense won 5 of them. The offense won 12. It was overwhelming for the first team because the entire first offensive line, all 5 starters on the offensive line, won their reps against the starters on the defensive line. Now, there's 2 ways to look at that. One is, the LSU offensive line is awesome, which they are. And the other is, should we be concerned about the defensive line? And maybe. But here's what I will tell you about the defensive line. They have tremendous size and they have numbers. I was standing by the defensive line at one point, probably for about 10 or 15 minutes, just watching Bo Davis teach. They're working on rips and swims and combo moves. And I was just watching Bo Davis teach them. And I believe it was Glenn West from 24/7 who was standing by me. And he said, how do you look at them and think they're not going to be any good in the SEC, which is kind of the narrative, right? But you look at the end, they physically are so imposing. It's all of these 6'2", 6'3", 300, 310, 350, 315, 320 pound defensive linemen. They're these massive humans. And it's just so hard to believe that LSU's not going to be able to get competent defensive line play out of that group. I'm not telling you they got all Americans. I'm not telling you they got all conference players. What I am telling you is they have enough size and experience and veteran players and maturity and a really darn good coach in Bo Davis to be much better than they were a year ago. Now, in that pass rush I mentioned, so the starters on the offensive side went 5-0, which means that the second and third team, it was 7-5. Much more evenly matched. And for me, I look at that and I say, man, I understand that LSU is top heavy with its veterans on the offense, but the cavalry is coming. Kalaj Cobbins had a massive win over Ethan Callaway. JVR Suggs, by the way. JVR Suggs had a really nice win against Bordelon. So the point being, LSU's first 5 on the offensive line are undeniably better than LSU starters on the defensive line. I don't think that's breaking news. They're going to be LSU starters on the offensive line are going to be better than most everybody's defensive line. But as you get into LSU's depth, LSU's 2s on the defensive line are as good or better than LSU's 2s on the offensive line. I mean, LSU's starting 2 true freshmen right now on the 2 deep. I have 2 true freshmen on the 2 deep right now. So I think you're going to start to see, as they recruit better, you're starting to see that depth normalize and LSU be more competitive along the way. One other quick note. we saw the kick returners. Here's how it went. No Xavier Thomas. He was there, but not participating. So your first kick returners, remember there's 2 kick returners back. So you had Aaron Anderson and Javen Nicholas. Your second were Caleb Jackson and Caden Durham. And your third were Jelani Watkins and Josh Williams. Those were the 6 kick returners with no Xavier Thomas. Had Xavier Thomas been out there, my guess is you would have seen Aaron Anderson, Xavier Thomas running first as the kick returners. And then we saw the 2 place kickers with Aiden Corbello and Damian Ramos kicking off, and Peyton Todd, the punter, was kicking off as well. Remember, still no Nathan Dybert. Nathan Dybert tore his ACL in that A&M game. If you remember the play, he was making a tackle in the A&M game. He ended up tearing his ACL. So no Nathan Dybert. We haven't gotten an update there, but in the meantime, it was those 3 working on kickoffs on Monday. Tigers are back on the practice field on Tuesday, and we will have another hour or so of availability, and then we'll meet with Brian Kelly afterwards. So make sure you're here tomorrow for another full practice report from what we get to see. And then Wednesday, we get another full practice availability, and we get to speak to Joe Sloan. So tons of availability this week. But as we wrap up today's episode, we do so on a bit of a sad note, as a former LSU assistant has died. We'll talk about it as we wrap up next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. As we put a button on today's episode, some sad news to pass along, as former LSU assistant coach Steve Kragthorpe died on Sunday night. You might remember Steve Kragthorpe, whose time at LSU, unfortunately, was cut short because of his diagnosis with Parkinson's disease. Kragthorpe was a head coach, a very proven quarterback coach and play caller. A lot of different places. Boston College, Texas A&M, had a stint in the NFL with the Buffalo Bills, and then he became the head coach at Tulsa and took over a terrible program and led them to a bowl game in 1991. I'm sorry, since 1991. He was there from 03 to 06. It led them to 3 bowl games. And then went to Louisville. He won, by the way, the Conference USA Championship in 2005. And from there, he got the head coaching job at Louisville, where he was in 2007, 8, and 9, and didn't ever have as much success at Louisville. He was 6-6, then 5-7, then 4-8. So, and then he got fired after year 3. He took the 2010 year off of football and then became LSU's offensive coordinator. And before that 2011 season is when Steve Kragthorpe was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So he stayed on LSU's staff. But it was at that point that they elevated Greg Studrawa to be the offensive coordinator, and Stud got to be the OC and play caller for that great 2011 team that made a run all the way to the SEC championship and the national title game. Well, we all know how it ended. But Kragthorpe stayed on LSU staff for 2 seasons, 2011 and then 2012. And my understanding of that whole thing is that LSU did right by Kragthorpe to make sure that even after his Parkinson's diagnosis, he stayed on staff, so he had insurance. But nonetheless, that's when his coaching career would end. And Steve Kragthorpe was not very public after he left LSU. That would be his last coaching job, was at LSU. And then on Sunday night, Kragthorpe died at the age of 59. Certainly young. I can't tell you that I have any real personal connection to Steve Kragthorpe. I was a young host and reporter during those years. My first year covering LSU was 2007. So that would have been, my fifth and sixth year covering the team. So I wasn't brand new, but I was still young. And other than maybe a press conference interaction or two, I can't tell you that I knew Steve Crackthorpe, but I know a lot of people who played for him, who worked with him and coached under him, who rave about the man. Not only the football coach, but the man. And I know a lot of those people certainly are mourning today. So wanted to pass along sincere condolences to everyone who knew, worked under, and loved Steve Crackthorpe, and certainly to his family as well, as former LSU assistant coach Steve Crackthorpe, dead at the age of 59. Okay, that'll do it for us here on this episode of Locked on LSU. As we mentioned, we appreciate you for making Locked on LSU your first listen today. Now, go check out Locked on College Football, from NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors. Our buddy Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. So you can find the link to Locked on College Football in the description of this episode, so you don't even need to go search for it. It's part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, that'll do it for us here. If you're on podcast, please subscribe. If you haven't done so yet, rate us, leave a review. YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell, of course, so you're notified whenever we post a new video. Looking forward to tomorrow's episode. The next 2 days this week, we'll have practice reports. Brian Kelly recapping practice on Tuesday. Joe Sloan meeting with reporters on Wednesday. So we'll have tons of content for you this week and all throughout the season. So make sure you're here for Locked on LSU. It's your team every day.